Old Athens Cemetery, also known as Jackson Street Cemetery, is one of the most famous historical landmarks in Athens, Georgia. Inside of these gates right here are people who either lived in Athens or chose their final resting spot to be the Old Athens Cemetery. These people, now buried in the ground, are people who walked the same places we do today, only around 200 years ago. The people buried in the cemetery were alive mainly during the 1800s. Some are even Revolutionary War heroes. Who were these people? What was their life story? What were their last words? Being surrounded by those who lived over 2 centuries before me sparked these questions into my head. Reading each of these names engraved on these tombstones brings to mind that people in the cemetery were living life just like people today, only during a much different time. However, the tombstones here are not the only ones that used to be in this cemetery. Baldwin Hall, to the right of the cemetery, used to be an extension of Jackson Street Cemetery, but when the University of Georgia started expanding, they built over the cemetery, covering up a large portion of the Jackson Street Cemetery, making it the one we know today. Something I found interesting about this cemetery is that all people, slave owners and slaves, were buried in this graveyard. Revolutionary War veterans are also among the rest of the Athens community that is buried here as well. This burial ground was used from the 1790s until about the late 1800s, even though it was officially closed in 1856. Oconee Hill Cemetery, a new cemetery around the 1800s, became the more popular and desired cemetery for those in Athens since it was new and spacious. This led to some of those buried in Jackson Street Cemetery being exhumed and moving to Oconee Hill because of their relatives' desires. As it's easily noticeable, many of these tombstones are cracked and moved around, obviously not being kept up well. Did this happen from weathering, aging? Once bodies were discovered under Baldwin Hall, it was found out that many of those buried there were those of African descent. They were buried down the hill from the white deceased population, who rested at the top of the incline, as well as important in the wealthy population. It interests me how so many people during this period were so concerned about skin color that even in death they are separated. Some of the tombstones I noticed were uninscribed. They had a name, lived a life, and are buried here amongst others with names, so why is their gravestone blank? Because there is no way they lived a completely blank life. Why are some of these tombstones surrounded by gates? Some of the ones I noticed were alone, and others were gated together. I wondered if they were possibly a family, close friends. Regardless, these people are side by side for the rest of eternity, which is an overwhelming thought. Cemeteries, especially Jackson Street Cemetery, hold so many secrets that essentially no one will be able to find out. Whatever secrets these people buried in the cemetery had, died with them. I've always found cemeteries to be interesting and educational places, while some people might find them scary and dangerous. I believe there's so much to learn from cemeteries, and if no one goes in them, no one will ever know.